Hello.
Hey, Anne, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Wonderful. So, Anne, I was wondering if you could tell me just to start off with a bit about yourself, your work, and how you came to be an author and in the position you are currently today.
Well, I, like many people, came to this work because I was dealing with my own chronic pain and anxiety and issues.
Mm,
And I started my journey trying to solve those issues. I had chronic pain since I was a teenager, and yoga and meditation have been a huge part of my healing for that. And it started when I was in college and I started taking classes, but I wasn't really that into the more, you know, esoteric parts of the practice. I just wanted the physical. So even when we got to the meditation portion of the class or the yoga nidra at the end, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is such a waste of time. What am I doing here? But slowly I started to gain the benefits when teachers would do a practice that gave me a glimpse of what that true relaxation feels like. The different techniques work for different people. So it took a little while for me to get into it. And then I devoted my life to it. So I ended up studying yoga in India and Tai Chi and China, and then pursuing a Master of Science graduate degree in yoga therapy to get the science side of it. And from there, I combined all of those things to now teach teachers and help people in pain, severe chronic pain conditions, overcome through yoga and meditation because it's helped me so much. So I think that's the story of many people. We see the
mhm.
benefits for ourselves, and then we want to share it with others that have similar problems.
Yeah, I think that's the case. Do you teach a specific style of yoga, or have you landed on? It sounds like you've
Yeah.
obviously trained a lot and learned a lot, but are you currently offering it as far as yoga goes?
Yeah, so I was trained in traditional hatha and then in India in Shivananda and Ashtanga. And then I came back to the US ready to teach like Shivananda and Ashtanga, which are very set series. Shivananda
Mhm.
starts with headstand, shoulder stand, plow, bridge, fish. So I came to the US thinking I could teach that to people, and everybody was just absolutely lost. And it was not appropriate for so many populations. And that's when I got more into yoga therapy and how to adapt for accessibility. So I did my training in yoga for arthritis with the yoga researcher, Dr. Stephanie Munoz. And I began to adapt more and more for people with joint mobility issues. A lot of people have arthritis, so it's very common. If for yoga teachers, if you're teaching a class, people in the class have arthritis. And for many people out there, people that have arthritis or you have it yourself. So that's been a big pillar to my teaching is how do I adapt for joint and mobility and injury restrictions. And so my YouTube channel and Swanson Wellness, I teach a lot of chair yoga and like gentle Tai Chi. So just getting people moving and helping them with tools to adapt to those traditional practices. So I definitely don't do headstand, shoulder stand, plow, bridge, fish to open a class anymore. It's a lot more therapeutic, and I work with one-on-one clients. It's very individualized, based off of what they need.
Beautiful. It's funny that I didn't know that about you, and I talked with Stephanie only on Friday.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, I'm writing a pretty comprehensive article for U.S. News and World Report on yoga for arthritis, and so
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of full circle. And yeah, I feel like a lot of yoga is that. It's like you could learn and get so deep into certain components of a yoga practice, but then bridge the gap to offer it to the general public to make the greatest impact. You realize folks are dealing with a lot. Maybe they can't do, a deeply spiritual practice just yet because they are in serious major pain. And so I feel like there's something about a yoga practice that it's more than just the physical, but then also, you got to make it accessible to folks. And it sounds like it's a matter of kind of bridging that gap and meeting people where they're at and offering more and more as they're ready. Is that your sense when you talk
Yeah,
about teaching
definitely.
yoga?
Yes, definitely. I think that my first book, Science of Yoga, it has 30 poses that, as the publisher DK describes, they're aspirational. I include a lot of
Mhm.
modifications and options, variations of the poses and things to do. However, from face value, the poses are quite aspirational. And I felt like putting a book out there in the world, I wanted to make sure that there was a balance of the spiritual side of it. I even have in that book the science behind the spirituality, as well as pranayama and meditation. And so it has a balance of those things throughout. But of course, the sexy thing that people see is the 30 poses that are created with CGI. I had one of the best illustrators in the world, Aaron Lewis, work on this book. Second edition has just come out, and we updated a lot of the images in Science of Yoga. So I see all of these posts about the poses, and I started to feel like something was missing, that people are kind of missing the point. And I was maybe
Mhm.
contributing to that as much as I feel like the book talks about meditation and pranayama and all these other practices. It still feels like people see the sexy part. And so my second book that I just put out last year is Meditation for the Real World. And it has a lot of the science to support meditation, which we have a plethora of research on. It's just exponentially growing. But it also gives practical tips. How do I meditate if I feel like I'm not good at meditating? Or if, like me, it wasn't the part that drew you to the practice, but you started to get that glimpse of like how you really needed that. That's what you need most, but it doesn't feel
Mhm.
natural to you. So that's why I wrote Meditation for the Real World.
Yeah, both books are beautiful. I know I'm also kind of pushing on that aesthetic button. However,
Yeah,
however, I mean, it
yeah,
is very beautiful. And for someone who, learns in that way, that the images help, like, oh, these are the muscle groups in this pose, and I could see it. And yeah, and just it kind of makes it easier to go right into, hey, if you're dealing with pain, arthritis, look up the arthritis bit and go right to
yes.
the picture and look at, what's going on anatomically, physiologically, in the science of yoga, at least. And so those pictures are really a helpful tool as well. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's
I think,
beautiful.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's what DK books are all about. So I'm so grateful. I studied art in undergraduate. So to be able to work with some of the best artists, it's really been full circle for me. And I am a visual learner, but also a kinesthetic learner. And so I think
Mhm.
Science of Yoga invites the reader to put the book down on the mat and do the
Mhm.
pose. Try it out. Notice, do you feel the muscles engaging or stretching in the way that's pictured? Because we're all different. Notice how it
Mhm.
feels to do the variation of the pose. And that's one of my favorite things I do see on social media. And somebody tags me my at scienceof.yoga Instagram account. They tag a picture of them doing that, just that. They have the book next to their mat.
Mhm.
They're practicing with it. And that's what I really want to encourage people to do, is to use the tools, not just intellectualize them.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's how it should be with the yoga practice. It's not a talking or reading school, which is also important, but also, put it into action, put it into your body and embody it as well. And is that how you suggest you use the book? That,
Yeah.
read a little bit, or if there's a concern, find that, specific pain point maybe you're dealing with, and then open up the science of yoga, look up the condition that you're working with, and then practice it. Is that how one should approach the
It
book?
could be approached by pose, so if you're doing a deep
Mhm.
dive into pose, you can do that as well as by concern, and there's a great index in it too. But in this second edition, I felt like that's what people really want, is those therapeutic sequences. So we added a
Mhm.
whole new section in this edition that is therapeutic sequences for back pain. If you have knee pain, wrist pain, how do you adapt? A lot of people tell me I would do yoga, but my wrist or my knees, so I just can't go. I can't go to the class. And that's not true if you adapt therapeutically. So I actually added those parts to the book, but also I have a free resource for your listeners at www.scienceof.yoga. It's a therapeutic sequences ebook that takes it even further and gives you videos of these practices so that you can adapt. So that's at scienceof.yoga.
Wonderful. Yeah, I do feel like most folks are reluctant to try yoga, or I have a lot of men on my radar. I teach that population
Mhm.
yoga, and yeah, there's a lot of things that are daunting in entering a yoga studio or a yoga class. And, for even a teacher to consider each individual's therapeutic concerns is a big task, unless it's like a very small group. And it's like, hey, if we're all dealing with the same, like yoga for arthritis, good. We could get around to everybody and figure it out. And those classes seem few and far between, and every individual is just that, an individual. And so it seems like a really great resource for someone who finds, like you said, the practice a bit daunting, and yeah, so it's really refreshing to see that, it's something that could be accessible for anyone with injury or pain. And so it's great.
Yeah, if you can breathe, you can do yoga.
Yeah, right. Right. I always say that. It's so true. And also your meditation book is really lovely as well. I love that it's so practical and doable. For someone who's, like you said, reluctant for trying meditation, or they've done it in the past. I remember my first yoga teacher training, you're asked to sit cross-legged for 20, 30 minutes. And I remember not being able to stand up. I was in so much pain. And so, could you kind of explain that book a little bit, and who it's for, and how it might make or demystify a meditation practice?
Yeah, it demystifies it by providing the science. I collaborated with Harvard researcher Dr. Sarah Lazar to integrate the most cutting edge science in an accessible way with pictures. Because even though we're
Mm,
adults, we learn like children. Picture books really help. I had a illustrator from the New York Times do the illustrations, so they're really fun and engaging. So it's a great gift book for anybody that really needs to meditate or has been interested in it but feels like they can't do it or wants to know where to start. And it is organized by your concerns. So even more like specific with the concerns is that you could look up a meditation for grief, a
mm,
meditation for anxiety, a meditation when you feel like you're doom scrolling too much. There's even one for doom scrolling. So there's
nice.
different meditations for different situations, but also beginner's guide of how to get started. Different ways you can sit. You don't have to sit cross-legged on the floor. You can sit in a chair and gain the benefits. You can lie down. Different meditations are lying down. So I explain those options for a beginner, as well as that science that will motivate you to practice. And I do have, like, for those people that want to get started practice and don't know where to start, sometimes audio meditations are
Mm,
helpful. So meditationfortherealworld.com, you can also get audio meditations, a 5-day deep dive of science-backed meditations that go with the book that help you to bring it to life, as well as I integrate sounds that have been engineered to optimize your brain waves. So if you're that type of person that really enjoys music or sounds of nature, it's very helpful. So yeah, I think it's for the beginner. And then I use it for teacher training too. I do use it for
nice.
teachers because it has so much of that science in it.
Yeah, there's so much benefit for meditation that's backed by science. Could you kind of just maybe tell me some of those benefits of
Yeah.
a meditation practice? And I think people get a little mixed up with like deep relaxation, something that maybe we do in Shavasana, to meditation. Is there any parallels, or could you kind of
Yeah.
distinguish the difference between the two?
Yeah, so the yoga nidra practice that we often do lying down or a relaxation practice. It could be considered a type of meditation. But when we
Mhm.
say meditation, a lot of the research is that more formal, seated meditation that could be seated in a chair. A lot of times it is in research. It's not necessarily in a specific position, but the spine being elongated is what is done in a lot of traditional practices. I had a long conversation with Dr. Lazar about like, what is meditation? Because people will say like, oh, I love to play guitar. That's my meditation. But that's flow
Mhm.
state, right? When you're playing guitar, when you're painting, you're in flow state and it feels meditative. You're in the zone. That's this immersive feeling of being completely present. So you're being mindful. People
Mhm.
confuse mindfulness with meditation. We can infuse mindfulness into anything we do. But then there's meditation, and there's even mindfulness meditation using that technique. But there's the formal meditation where you're practicing. It's like your boot camp to practice for the real world. So if you can sit there and do these audio meditations or do the practices listed out in Meditation for the Real World book, you can sit there, then you're practicing so that you're able to get into flow state when you're painting, when you're doing your craft, when you're working, you're able to get into it quicker and stay in it longer. So it's boot camp for your mind. So that's kind
Mhm.
of the difference, but you can be meditative in your everyday life and it's building that skill. Meditation is a type of flow state, but not all flow states are meditation. They just meditative.
God, yeah. And I've spoke with several people about, how meditation builds like gray matter in the brain, which is fascinating. I mean, that's, in my opinion, the most fascinating benefit. I'm like, huh, meditate for your brain, and which is really interesting and fascinating. What are some of your findings that you think are interesting that are science backed around
Well,
meditation?
I'd like to elaborate on that because I worked with Dr. Lazar, who's really involved in the groundbreaking research of that exact thing. I mean, over
Mhm.
2 decades ago was when she released a study about how the gray matter builds in elderly meditators, making their brains 50-year-old meditators and people that are older, similar to non-meditators in their 20s. So
Mhm.
there's this finding that it helps preserve the natural degradation of the gray matter that happens with age.
Mhm.
Now, when I was doing research for this book, Dr. Lazar and many others had said, that is true, but where we are in the neuroscience is different now. That's not
Mhm.
really what we're interested in as neuroscientists. What we are interested in is how the brain is not in these separate parts that are built. The hippocampus related to memory builds gray matter, the prefrontal cortex related to focus builds gray matter. Those things are true. However, it's more about the holistic engagement of the brain while we're meditating and then going into these states afterwards, like flow state, right? It's
Mhm.
that different areas or regions of the brain are communicating and they're doing that in unison. And that's what neuroscientists are diving into now. It's networks. So, not
Mhm.
individual areas, but instead the network activation. And what we know is that there's this network called the default mode network, and it is active when we are mind wandering, when we're daydreaming, when we're doing something but we're not thinking about that thing we're doing. We're thinking about something else. You're thinking about what you're going to eat later. You're thinking about what you did yesterday and how you said that thing that you regret, rather than being present with your children, rather than being present washing the dishes. And the research shows, and research that has been published in Science, very prestigious journal, shows that when you are thinking of something other than what you're doing, when you're in that default mode network, you're less happy.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter if you're doing dishes or doing something enjoyable, you're less happy and you're more
Mhm.
happy when you're present doing it. This is something that ancient people knew. This is something that Buddhism speaks to, and yoga philosophy, Hinduism, Eastern philosophy speaks to, is that presence, right? And so we're just
Mhm.
confirming it with science. So with meditation, we're switching the network activity to be in more often what's called the central executive network. That's when you're really focused, present, able to be your highest self, make the best decisions. So I thought that was really interesting is that the neuroscience has developed to a new area of interest, and we're looking more holistically at the brain now.
Interesting. And it's all about how those different regions of the brain are firing in unison or in
Yes.
relationship. Okay.
Yes.
And that is what you would consider how that's functioning based on how that's functioning would be considered whether it's like a healthier brain or their brain is functioning well or better, or how do they
Yeah.
kind of view
Don't
that?
don't get me wrong. Default mode network can be a positive thing because sometimes we need to daydream to be creative or to like it can be a like really positive thing, but we need to be able to turn it off.
Hmm.
No, we need to be able to come up with the ideas and brainstorm, but then when we're doing something, we need to be able to focus and do that thing. That's the happiness, is being able
Hmm.
to turn on and off the appropriate networks in your brain to not be a slave to your brain, but instead to be able to choose what network activity you're in. And that's what meditation gives us the skill to do.
Interesting. Okay. And is that equated to rumination?
Yes.
You hear, okay.
And anxiety. So rumination would be past thoughts, and anxiety or worries
Future.
would be about future thoughts. So it is any thought that's in the future or past would be in that default mode network, that mind wandering state.
Okay. Yeah, it is fascinating. And it's interesting that it could be a skill set, something you could develop like a muscle group and
Yes.
over time. Okay.
Yes, it is. We have
Interesting.
to put our brain through this boot camp, and that's what meditation is. So even if you feel like you're bad at meditating, and every time you meditate, your mind wanders, and you feel like you have to keep bringing it back to focus over and over, back to that focal point that the teacher tells you that's outlined, that's good. That
Mm.
means you're training your brain. The more you bring it back, the more you're training it. So it's not a bad thing if your mind wanders. Mind wandering is a part of meditation. Actually, meditation, I have this beautiful chart in Meditation for the Real World that shows the different brain network activity that occurs during meditation. And the first step of meditation is your teacher's going to tell you to focus on something. That might be your breath, for example. It might be a mantra you repeat, but whatever your focal point is, you focus on it. Beginner meditator, your mind might wander like 2 seconds in, right? So
Right.
with the second step to meditating, whether you're a beginner or advanced, you're going to get to this second step. The second step is mind wandering. It is
Mm.
going into that default mode network. It's going to happen to everybody. Even if you're the Dalai Lama, your mind will wander at some point, or a monk, your mind is going to wander. It's human nature. So that's the second step. And then the third step of meditation is a brain network called the salience network picks up, and it determines the salience or the importance of what your mind has just wandered to. If it's what you're going to eat later for dinner, not that important for this 10-minute time period, right? You can deal with that when you're done. If it's the smell of smoke and a fire alarm going off, you know what? You better get out of the house. So your salience network is going to determine, is this important enough right now to abandon and stop the meditation? If it's not, which what, 99.99% of the time it's not going to be, then you're going to
Mhm.
come back to that focal point that the teacher has given you. That's meditation. People think meditation is just focusing on the focal point, but it's not. Meditation is the process of cycling through those networks of activity and being able to get to that central executive network, get to that focus quicker and stay there longer is something that happens with practice. It's a practice.
Mhm.
It doesn't come naturally to us. It's not like we're born with it. We learn it like learning to read. It's this skill you learn over time, and you keep getting better and better and better at it.
Yeah, and then you could take that off your meditation cushion or your meditation chair, right? And hey, I need to buckle down and write this article. And is it
Yes.
a process of, yeah, you notice your mind start to meander or wander, and then you're develop the skill through meditation to refocus in on the task at hand? Is that one of the
Definitely helping
Yes.
you get
Okay.
into and stay in that flow state more. But what I wrote meditation for the real world to do was to then teach you a 3-minute practice you can do before you write that article,
Mhm.
a 5-minute practice you can do before you go work out to get a better workout. So it's about how can we integrate these little mini meditations, sometimes even 1-minute meditations, into our life to refocus, to be able to get back into that state better. And just like we're finding with exercise, these, exercise snacks or yoga breaks that we do through the day are more effective for a variety of measures, for our blood sugar maintenance, for us strengthening, for our focus and mental health, when you split it up into little ones through the day rather than just having 1 hour of exercise per day. So we're seeing
Mhm.
that more and more in the research. The same is true for meditation. If we can split it up into little tiny chunks through the day, we seems to get more benefits than if we do, and nobody I know is doing like an hour a day, but a longer
Yeah.
period of time a day.
That's interesting. Okay. And that's it seems like a lot more accessible or less daunting to break it up like that even.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay. Awesome. And now the science of yoga. So this is the second edition, is it?
Yes, it's the second edition. The first edition came out in 2019.
Okay. There is a lot in here. And it do we stand with science research and yoga in a kind of a broader picture?
Yeah, there has been an exponential growth of research in yoga. I will say meditation, which is a part of yoga, but it's also broader. It falls into many other cultures and perspectives, not just yoga.
Mhm.
Meditation has way more research on it. So
Huh.
when we're just looking at like large body equality evidence, there's even more for meditation than there is for yoga. Now, if we look at yoga as having these different parts, then we can look into tangential research, right? Like all the meditation research really applies to yoga. A lot of exercise research we can apply to yoga too, which I did in this
Mhm.
book. So we can look at tangential fields to inform our understanding of yoga. But yoga research itself it's expensive and there's not as much funding for it. So
Mhm.
it it alone is growing, but it's not compared to like physical therapy or meditation as robust. What we do know is that yoga is really beneficial for therapeutic populations. It's not just for, as the advertisements make it look, thin people that are super athletic to get more athletic or to relax more. It's actually in most of the research studies used for people with arthritis, Parkinson's, for balance and fall prevention, people with depression. We see a lot of promise there. Cancer. So, alongside chemotherapy, yoga is really helpful for helping with the symptoms and helping through cancer care. So, it's also helpful for um, these these populations that need adaptation. So I think that's what people don't think of is that like we have more research on therapeutic adaptive yoga than we do, these fancy uh,
Mhm.
flows that are more popular. Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
contrary.
benefits every single system of your body too. It's not just your
Mhm.
brain, it's your immune system, less sick days at work. It's your cardiovascular system. We see a lot of promise for lowering the risk of heart disease, lowering blood pressure. Even as an integrated program, it plays a role in reversing heart disease. So it is beneficial not just for one part of your body, like your muscles or your brain. It's beneficial for every single system. And then holistically, your overall happiness and fulfillment is something that yoga can address. That spiritual component, whether you want to call it spiritual or not, it
Mhm.
it helps you to get in touch with your body's needs and your mind's needs and to listen better so that you can listen to your life's calling and your dharma and live out your dreams. So, really, all aspects of health and wellness, yoga does address because it is an integrated practice.
Now, does research have a specific protocol when it comes to yoga. Like, hey, we are all going to use these 12 poses. We're going to hold it for this long. We're going to breathe this way. We're going to think about this thing. Like, and that's what I think gets a little bit challenging too when it comes to the research behind yoga. Do they look at a specific style? They practicing like chronic low back pain. You know, it seems like there's more gentle
Yeah.
holds and more of yeah, more of a restorative type of practice that they looked at for a lot of that research. But, you know, is this a very like broad field as far as like what styles are looking at, what poses and those sort of things? Or has science put like a yoga protocol in place to research?
This is actually a question you should go in depth with Dr. Stephanie Muniz because she
Hmm.
is a researcher involved in writing articles about those protocols and trying to create some levels of standardization. There is not, and that is true of yoga in general, as often it's individualized or adapted for different groups. So I think in a way we would lose something if we said it's these 12 poses, right? Because
Hmm.
I can already think I'm going to teach 12 different poses to somebody with arthritis that is trying to deal with chronic pain than I would teach to somebody with multiple sclerosis or somebody who's dealing with depression. It's going to be different sequences, right? That's what the therapeutic adaptations and sequences are in the Science of Yoga book. How do we think about what do those needs and populations need? It's different. So part
Hmm.
of yoga is that it's adaptive, and that's so great. There are sort of like not standards, but general patterns we see in the research that are followed. Like generally, to see an effect, it's 8 weeks, twice a week. That's a pretty common protocol when we're saying, hey, yoga builds gray matter. It was most likely done 8 weeks, twice a week,
Yeah.
plus
Yeah.
some 20-minute homework sessions. That's, the Yoga for Arthritis program was that. It was 8 weeks, twice a week, for example.
Hmm.
So that's something as we see as a pattern. A lot of times, yoga research integrates all of those, the 8 limbs of yoga, or all the different aspects of yoga that make it such a rich integrated practice. So some people might worry, oh, well, yoga research is just looking at the physical poses, like you said, that example of 12 poses doing this. No, the yoga researchers themselves are yogis, or they get consultants that are very advanced teachers to advise on what the protocol should be. And a yoga class isn't just 12 poses. It's pranayama, it's breath awareness while you're doing the poses, it's that mindfulness infused, it's meditation at the end of the practice, even if it's just a couple of minutes. It incorporates all of these elements, sometimes mudras or chanting Om. So a yoga protocol tends to incorporate a well-rounded yoga class, not just the
Yeah.
physical. So that's something that I think we should keep in mind is it's really all of those aspects coming together, not just the poses or not just this one part of yoga. You do the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, you brought up several things about, you know, yoga being adaptive and how it's studied a lot in these populations that are dealing with different diseases or chronic pain. And I just think of as someone who's taught for a while now, 16 years, and I think you get into teaching yoga thinking, you know, everything's going to be like a yoga studio yoga class or a gym yoga class where we're going to be moving and grooving. Here comes the music and 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 when really the reality of it is, I think if you want to make the greatest impact as a teacher is to focus in on a population that you could serve. You know, for me, it
Yes.
was like former athletes, a ton of injuries, an
Yes.
arthritis and pain. And like, hey, this is how you stand up off the ground using a chair and the floor without tweaking your knee and your back.
Yes.
Does it dishearten you at all to see what yoga is sort of the state of yoga currently, the social media through the lens of the filters, and maybe by building a bigger business with yoga, you have to have these like cool looking moves that are very bendy, but in reality, you know, you're not necessarily maybe I don't know, what's the difference between what's true and what's just kind of out there as an aesthetic? I guess this is a bigger
Yeah.
question. Like, what's your thoughts on the current state of yoga?
Mm.
And does it dishearten you to maybe see such a huge population of teachers kind of focused in on maybe the wrong populations of people? Maybe there needs to be a call to focus in on how to help those who truly need um, the help. And
Yeah.
yeah, I guess that's a kind of a broad question, but I'm curious as someone who
Yeah.
studies this, what you think of the current culture in yoga.
Sometimes it's disheartening, or you see, which hashtags and which type of videos are gone viral on TikTok or Instagram. You're like, oh my, this is not representing yoga well at all. However, on the other hand, the population of super fit people who want to do super fit sort of yoga asana classes and fancy poses, that population's served. It's
Yeah.
saturated. There's plenty of teachers competing for that spot. And so when I started my YouTube channel and Swanson Wellness, I was putting up chair yoga. And guess what? Not as many people are doing chair yoga. Or I filmed some prenatal yoga classes. Not many people are doing prenatal yoga classes for real issues like pelvic floor and weakness leading to incontinence. But that's real issue that you need,
Yeah.
or even constipation while you're pregnant. Everybody gets constipated while they're pregnant. And so it's not as sexy, but guess what? Whenever I put up a video of a chair yoga for knee replacements, or this pelvic floor for, working on the weakness of those muscles, those do really well.
Mm.
It's not as
Mhm.
much of a saturated market. So in a way, these are the people that need to be served. And so I feel I can step forward and serve them. So in that way, I don't feel disheartened, because I feel like the few people that gain the knowledge, because you do need to have more knowledge to do that, right? You need to have that perspective, that scientific background. How do I adapt? How do I safely integrate these practices for these populations? Those people can come forward and teach. And a lot of them are. You see a lot of physical therapists coming forward to teach, a lot of people specializing like you, and athletes and people with arthritis. And so we can come forward and do that. So in a way, I'm disheartened, and in a way, I feel like it's very clear who I want to serve.
Yeah, that I think if you focus in on an actual impact or and therefore usually better income rather than just likes on social media, I think the more you get heartened or to continue to teach. I think so many times I think teachers try to be everybody's teacher
Yes.
and it's very easy to burn out and it's kind of scary thinking that you might be put in a smaller box by saying, "Hey, I'm the yoga for knee replacement person."
Yeah.
When
That's needed
really,
though.
yeah, like more people could find you in this sea of yoga teachers. Like, hey, who do I go to see if I've got a knee replacement? Okay, this is
Yeah.
my teacher, and it's clear. And so, um, excellent. Yeah, I was just curious to your thoughts because I feel like being a yoga teacher has its ups and downs, but if you kind of cycle back to focusing in on a population that you could actually help and provide a lot of value to, it's rewarding and more sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, and for me, it's people with chronic pain. So
Mhm.
arthritis, joint mobility issues, injuries, because I've dealt with the pain myself, and because yoga, being this multifaceted practice, really addresses that pain and the stress and anxieties that go along with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you have a specific diagnosis or what were you dealing with that had chronic pain?
I didn't for a long time. I definitely have arthritis in my wrist. So I'm one of those people that's like, oh, I can't do that flow class because it starts to hurt my
Mhm.
wrist. And the joint pain comes and goes, flares. And recently, in the last couple of years, I got a fibromyalgia diagnosis. So that being a sensitivity, and it's very much interrelated to stress, lack of
Mhm.
sleep. Those sort of
Mhm.
things flare me up for sure. So yoga helps me to stay more balanced.
Great. And do you find that there's more people now that maybe we're more aware, or since maybe the pandemic, or since like our mental health's hit a like real breaking point, that chronic pain is more prevalent now? Do we know, or is your sense that it's more common that folks are seeking out help for chronic pain more than ever before? It just seems like it's more on the map than ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think once you hit a certain age, like in your 40s, the pain starts for everyone if you haven't been upkeeping or if you have any sort of concern, like I had this inflammation and fibromyalgia, then it just continues to go up. So I see that the medical model is not addressing it well.
Mm,
Uh, a lot of my one-on-one clients are on many medications and they don't like the side effects of the medications. So it can be really challenging because the medical model doesn't address pain well. It's kind of a band-aid and we want to work with lifestyle and self-regulation and um, movement and meditation. And then we can also integrate the medical model. So not pushing that
mm,
away, but it's not doing well with pain. So we need
mm,
these lifestyle interventions. They call it lifestyle medicine for a reason. Yoga is
mm.
lifestyle medicine.
Yeah, and more pushing more towards the biopsychosocial model when looking at chronic pain, I think is the seems to be more of the common accepted path to go. And it seems like yoga, meditation, and breath work hits all of those nicely if you've got a resource. And I feel like you are a great resource between these two books. It really hits all of those beautifully. And so if someone maybe doesn't have access to uh, yoga class in their community that fits them, or a teacher that's qualified to handle their pains, I know it could be isolating. And something like your book and your resources online, that's a good place for someone who maybe even is brand new to dive in um, and get started.
Yeah, I would say start with whether you want to dive into the science of yoga and those therapeutic sequences or meditation and that 5-day challenge. Choose one or the other, either at scienceof.yoga or meditationfortherealworld.com, and you'll get those resources to get started. And
Mm,
then, from there, I'll share with you my YouTube channel and Swanson Wellness. You can link these below, but
yeah,
sign up for one of those two offers and you'll get the resources you need.
beautiful. And yeah, and also for yoga teachers themselves, it seems like a very accessible, great resource if you're wanting to help different populations. If you've got that student that you want to try to serve them the best you could, would you suggest yoga teachers? Would this be a good resource for them as well?
Yeah, especially yoga teachers. I use both of those books in my teacher training, my Science of Yoga certification and the certification to be a meditation teacher, because they incorporate the science plus the practical tips. So definitely for yoga teachers, these books are a must-have. They're the books I
Mm,
wish I had when I started teaching,
yeah,
all the compilation of resources that I put together, like what I had to gather myself because it didn't exist in that form. So I work with a lot of yoga teachers. I'm the teacher of teachers in that way too.
beautiful. Does it Do you have suggestions for teachers who are trying to implement the science-backed benefits into their yoga classes? I've traditionally there's been certain styles of yoga I go to and I hear them spout out certain scientific benefits and I just shake my head. So I'm like,
Well, first teach what you know. Don't just make
yeah.
it up or because you heard it from someone. I have all the references to where I came with the claims and science of yoga. So
Mhm.
it's not just something I heard and I think I remember, so I'm saying, right? I think
Right,
that's what
right.
happens is that's where that misinformation is spread, especially through social media. So teach what you know. You can be informed by science. You don't have to constantly say science things also, like if you're
Right.
getting confused by them. So that's something I see is teachers just talking about things they don't know as much. But that's also why I've created programs to teach teachers, because when you can explain to people the benefits behind why they're doing what they're doing, they're going to be more likely to come back to you because you know what you're talking about,
Mhm.
and to do the practice. And that's really the secret to this is it's only going to work if you do it and not
Right.
if you just think about it. You got to actually do it.
Mhm. And be consistent, I feel, is a huge part of it as well.
Yes,
Mhm. Great. And I feel like the more you educate people about their pain and why we're doing what we're doing, the better the pain experience becomes, that they get out of pain more effectively that way as well.
absolutely. And the research confirms that pain
Right.
education helps people feel less alone and more empowered to do something about it. It's not just something happening to them. It's a thing that they can address through lifestyle medicine.
Great. And now, is there anything you recommend beyond yoga and meditation for folks who are maybe struggling or just trying to have the best um, health outcomes with their movement practices or just their mind, body, spirit type of
Yeah.
practices? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I also practice Tai Chi and Qigong. My YouTube channel and Swanson Wellness, I have my most popular video is actually Tai Chi. I think that it's an underutilized practice.
Hmm.
It's something that a lot of people who feel like, oh, I can't do yoga because it involves getting down to the floor, even though you can do chair yoga, but they
Uh,
feel like it's not accessible to them. Tai Chi is much more accessible and that it's all standing, or you could do it seated in a chair, but you don't have to get up and down from the floor. And it's really great for balance. Also, one thing I love about Tai Chi is you can like do it in the park or like in public. Like, I don't feel comfortable getting down on the ground in public and doing
yeah.
yoga necessarily, but to do Tai Chi, it's a very relaxing practice you can do on the beach. My husband and I will be on a hike and like, let's just do a little Tai Chi right now. So
Hmm.
I think that's something that I've been integrating more and more into my wellness practice, and I hope it becomes more and more popular because it's so effective and accessible.
Beautiful. Any now, could someone develop strength through these practices? A lot of people, maybe it's through my social media, kind of are pushing back against yoga as being not for someone who's hypermobile. I understand the risks of being hypermobile with yoga,
Yeah,
but
that's interesting because I see that a lot too. And I just went to a massage therapist who I never tell massage therapists that I'm also a yoga teacher, a massage therapist. I just want to get their normal spiels. And she kept
uh-huh,
being like, you should not do yoga because you're so flexible. You know that, right? Don't do yoga. Don't do yoga. It's bad for you. And I think that
uh-huh,
is a claim or a thing that somebody that doesn't truly understand the practice, being that 8 limbs, being fully adaptive, would understand. And so if a
mhm,
doctor says don't do yoga, they're just saying don't do that, vinyasa fancy class that involves all the stretching. They're saying don't do that, but you can do one that's adapted for you. So yoga has been
mhm,
integral in my life, and I'm one of the most hypermobile people I know. I can put my legs behind my neck, and I
right,
work on strengthening in my yoga. My yoga practice is very strength and balance focused. I do stretching, but usually with a little bit more engagement to prevent me from going further. Like a yin yoga class is not for me. So
Mhm.
if you are hypermobile, a yin yoga is not for you.
Right.
Super stretchy class, the teacher does a lot of stretches. That's not for you, but it doesn't mean yoga is not for you. So that is a misconception I see is when we have this like generalization about it. It's not just about becoming more flexible. It can be about becoming stronger or better at balance, or for me, mental health is really key,
Mhm.
and just moving. I do a lot of joint freeing, and that therapeutic sequences handout that I have as a freebie at scienceof.yoga, that like it is like a lot of things that you can do when you feel in pain are just these mobilization, get the blood flowing. It doesn't have to be full on stretch to your extreme.
Yeah, I think that folks get this idea that it's supposed to be, yeah, tie yourself up in a pretzel or hold a full split. And, it's I think a lot of it comes back to, like you said, being adaptive. And I think like a good teacher with really great communication skills and providing very direct physical landmarks would be someone who would, prevent you from overstretching and developing strength within your practice as well. Like a good teacher that you resonate with is
Yes.
also, I think, really helpful, right?
Yeah, because you can be given modifications or options in a class. Like if you
Hmm.
want to get a good stretch, do it this way. If you want to focus more on strengthening, do it that way. And that's often how I give cues.
Hmm. Awesome. Wonderful. And what else would you like? Is there anything else you'd like to put out there for folks? The book is awesome. I mean, I just started going through, and it's beautiful and it's very accessible for those who are looking at the video. I mean, it's very, very beautiful and easy to understand and fun to kind of go through.
Yeah.
And whether you're looking up, like I said, arthritis or the pose specifically, or these sequences that are adaptable. I mean, it's very accessible and fun. It's kind of fun to go through if you're looking to learn and to adapt your practice. And is there anything else you want to put out there for folks about your books and what's next for you?
I mean, it's just a great gift book, whether it's for yourself or
Yeah.
to give a yogi that you really care about. I hope it's inspirational. That's really what my intention was, is to inspire people to practice, to encourage people to practice through the science and practical tips.
Yeah, it's a really wonderful resource. Folks, go pick it up. And if you're a yoga teacher, it's a must. And I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the work you're doing. And I would love to have you on again and talk more
Yeah.
sometime in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And you'll put the links below, but since it's two
Yes.
links, it's scienceof.yoga or meditationfortherealworld.com, whichever one you need more, meditation or yoga right now, go there and you'll get all the resources. So,
Yeah. And the books, sometimes these books that focus on anatomy could very, very daunting. Go ahead and crack this book open, folks. It's very, very fun and accessible. Like, I've had so many of these anatomy books where I'm like, oh boy,
oh, it's
I
like
think of,
school. Yeah.
yes, it's like school, which is fun for some, but I think a lot of people get into yoga for something more than just like you said, more
Yes.
than just reading and diagrams, but the practice of it. And this really informs the practice. And same with the meditation book. And so very well done, as beautiful books and really an excellent resource. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And yeah, I will put in the links down below. And is there any other, I know you mentioned the websites and the Instagram handle. Is that the best way for folks to find you and get the book?
The websites are, yeah, the two
Websites.
websites. And
Great.
yeah, I'll give you that information. I can send you a bio and everything you need afterwards too.
Beautiful. All right. Wonderful. This is really great, Anna. It's really great to meet you. You've been on my radar for a long time. It's a real honor to get to talk to you.
Great to talk to you too.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.